Hi.
Hi, this is Peggy from Roar. Our guest today, I'm really happy to welcome Keren Moynihan. So Keren is the CEO and co-founder of Boss Insight. Boss Insight digitize lending for banks, credit unions, alternative lenders. And Keren, I'd love to have a few words on Boss Insights, what you're doing before we dig in the questions.
Hi, Peggy. It's so great to be here. I have never sounded as good as I do when you say my name, so please keep saying it. So Boss Insights, it's a tech meets fin story. It's somebody who scaled Amazon and a couple other tech companies, and someone myself who's a former commercial banker. And what we saw was a need to fill critical data gaps and insight gaps for business lenders so that they could be evaluated on their merit in addition to their capital. We have a traditional banking system, and we need to get certain pieces of information because it's a regulated system. And what we wanted to do was offer key pieces of business, accounting, and commerce information on demand to lenders so that they could approve lending in minutes, not months.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing, and all your insight will come very handy, and your knowledge of the industry in the next question. So, COVID, obviously, that's the topics we cannot avoid. So, from your perspective, what will be some of these major lasting impacts of COVID on the financial services industry?
Uh, in a word, digitization. I think what we're seeing is a changing of the guard. It was actually one of our partners that pointed this out to me, but have you noticed this year how many CEO positions are open for banks in the United States? And actually, I just heard that there was a new CEO announced in a Canadian bank today. Last week, actually, I should say.
Oh,
So,
first woman, finally.
woo!
Woo.
Uh, shout out to the females who
Yeah.
are always praised for opening the doors. What we're seeing is that it's about banking was once about financial services. And if you listen to any of the recent panels with CEOs from community banks or whatnot, they're saying this: we are running tech firms that happen to sell financial services products. It's a real shift. And some people don't want to be running that type of company. They were running financial services in a regulated industry. And so that would be, I think, one of the biggest shifts that the industry has seen as a result of 2020.
So, in terms of regulations and policies that we see today, digitization obviously have pushed the regulators in some direction, and also a potential acceleration, even if in Canada it's always a bit slower. But what what do you see in your crystal ball happening in terms of regulations and policies?
Let's consult it. Okay, let's consult it. Um, Regulation is always one of those trigger topics because I don't believe that regulators are sitting there not to create innovation, but it's a matter of perspective. And I always look at Canada, the US, and the UK as three examples of different approaches to the financial services market. And what we have is, in the UK, we have the best example of regulation. It's a national strategy. It includes competition. If we could do those two things, we would be in a much better position. In Canada and the US, we're not so lucky to have a national strategy. There are a lot of people who are more connected and far more knowledgeable about this topic than I will ever be, and they have been fighting for it. We've heard the calls of politicians for it. There seems to be something that is making it not happen, and it's unfortunate. So that's the world in which we live. What you have as a result is, and then the other difference is size of market. So Canada is a lot like the UK in terms of the size and how many big players there are. 5 big players in Canada, 8 in the UK. There's 15,000 financial institutions in the United States. It's just a completely different industry. And as a result, you have a lot more competition and a lot more willingness to work with fintechs.
Mhm.
So if you're a Canadian firm, you're selling to the US. That's what you're doing. I call it the bare naked ladies approach to selling. They did not make it in Canada first either. And so you need to show that you can get the market to adopt you outside, and then the Canadian market will follow suit.
Yeah, I agree. It's sad sometimes to see that. There are a lot of companies telling me, well, but I want to sell in Canada. I'm like, yeah, you want to be successful. So first you go outside and then you come back. I absolutely agree with you. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, 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 no. I mean, given your experience, you've seen this firsthand. And we are all entrepreneurial here. We are all trying to make this ecosystem move forward. You do what works and then you live to fight the next day. That's the bottom line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we look, I would say a step further, and we look at global world, the global, financial order and stability. Stability. Obviously, a lot of debt is being taken by governments to finance COVID. We see increase in inequalities. We see a lot of things. What impacts do you think is gonna be very significant for the global financial order following COVID, or right in the middle of COVID, because we're still in the middle of it?
Yeah. So there was a panel with women in finance. The one we were speaking there, but it wasn't our panel. It was the one before. And there was a very amazing question. Give us one word for COVID. And everybody said busy or overwhelming. And I'm going to say inspired. I, you know, there's a call to action right now. We're in the lending industry, and lending was always a high risk, low rewards game. That's why it was so hard. That's why there was only the minority of businesses that got approved for debt, and the investing industry got created in the first place because it's very expensive to operate a loan in a regulated environment, and you're earning this much interest, right? It's a single digit number. So how do banks and credit unions, how can they afford that? And now the interest rate is lowering. So fintechs are really coming to the rescue there, because what we're saying is, banks, you are product first, which you must be. You need to understand how to operate these products in a regulated environment. We will be user first. We'll tell you how to make things scalable. Um, Another trend I'm seeing is a lot around inclusion, diversity, and it's not that it just came about in 2020. When Boston Insights started in 2017, there was a huge push in Canada for diversity, and Boston Insights has been the recipient of some of those programs. Things like Venture Lab and Tech Undivided, and Minister Mary Ng's Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Fund, right? We are having a moment where a lot of people got to really take a time out and think, not just be in the day to day. And they said, this status quo is not going to do. We need to make sure that we provide services to the underbanked. We need to make sure that people are not evaluated on whether they're an immigrant or not. That used to be a good thing, right? So that's another huge trend that I'm seeing. And I think with the changes in financial services and the changes, the call for inclusion, the call for diversity, I always say that data is the Achilles heel of bias. If you have information that shows you blaringly in the face that you are wrong to sit in your bias, you have to really bury your head deep into the sand to ignore it.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because we were talking offline about diversity, and how diversity helps bottom lines. And I remember showing many numbers explaining why it's good to have diversity, and if you invest in companies like yours that have diverse founders, you know people say yes, but the reality is still, we're still not capable. It's very interesting to see this cognitive dissonance, and I agree with you. Having data allow to have this conversation from a non-emotional perspective.
Yeah, I try and be a realist about it rather than using words or trigger words where people say, oh, not this topic again. Let's talk about it like this. When you run a business, you have a sales function, right? You have a marketing function, you have an operations function, you have somebody focused on customers. Why do you do that? Because different points of view create a better result. It's the Gestalt theory. And it's no different than when you're making sure that your teams are supporting that internally and that your product supports people externally. The reality is the global economy is diverse. If you only have one point of view, you are inherently unconsciously shutting other people out. So I do believe that I'm seeing it in challenges from reverse accelerator programs. They are including these types of challenges. They are trying to address it. Whether it comes to pass, whether there are actual deals done, I think that 2021 will answer that.
Yeah, exactly. So, in terms of resetting competitive positioning,
Mhm.
uh, what type of organization and which organization, of course, Boss Insight, will
Oh,
benefit,
yes.
will benefit from the changes in the ecosystem?
CB Insights and The Economist rocked the industry a couple weeks ago because they put out a very simple infographic. And I don't know about you, Peggy, but I'm exhausted. I cannot keep up with the information. Our brains were manufactured to handle 7 pieces of information at one point in time. I don't have any short term memory. Oh, sorry about that. I don't have any short term memory. I'm just writing lists after lists after lists. But CB Insights and The Economist cut through the noise with this one infographic. A decade ago, banks had 90%, 96% of the market share, and now they have 72%. What's interesting is that that was not a steady decline. They lost 15% market share in 9 years, and then another 9% in 1 year in 2020.
Ah,
That is shocking. And Square, companies like Square, they closed $820 million during the PPP craze, and 60% of that was new business. I believe the tribe has spoken. And what banks and credit unions have to decide is whether they're going to buy this type of capability or whether they're going to build it. And so
hopefully not building. I having worked in this large organization, I think if they should come to the realization they cannot build, please partner, please buy, don't build.
we have people were coy before 2020. I think this is a non-financial change. They wouldn't tell you they were evaluating or what their criteria was. But in 2020, in these meetings, the first question is, and I quote, "Why should I buy you and not build you?" And that I must give kudos to the people in banks who are saying things so clearly. The best thing you can do for any fintech is express exactly what you want and what you don't want. And then it's our responsibility to explain to you what we do and what we don't do. And I had to overcome that. That deal, we did it in under 2 months because of how specific people are being internally at banks right now. So it's incredible.
That's good to hear. So, staying on the large financial institutions topic, where do you see the digital transformation of these players going?
I think they have a choice to make. Are they going to be a traditional player, or are they going to basically have a fintech style department within a bank? And if that's the case, are they going to be a banking as a service provider? Are they going to simply do the innovation internally? These are real choices that banks are making right now. And what I see happening is that the larger you get, the more you're diversifying your strategy. I'll put it that way, as if it's a stock portfolio. Part of it is you're letting your charter out for fintechs, and the other part is you're adopting new technology. The smaller you go, you're having to make one or two real bets. That's what we're going to see more of. Um, there's one trend I didn't bring up, and it's that it used to be that how many branches you had was the marker of your quality. And what we're seeing this year is that community banks really had an outreach far beyond that because they serve the community and they didn't think of it in terms of there was no going home, there was no I'm tired. Those bankers worked around the clock to help businesses through this time.
Well, and you've seen that in the US with the PPP program, where some small community banks really punched above their weight by actually calling. They worked the phones the old ways, and while the large banks were actually building their portals and all of that, and they were able to really build that. So I still believe that you need to put financial services first versus technology. That's my perspective. You're a financial service provider. What happens behind, it's your own problem in your own kitchen, so it's not the client's problem.
I agree with you. There is no tech without somebody being willing to say, we will stand up these products in a regulated way. And yeah, so I
And
concur.
tend to forget that it's very important that products are regulated. Like people are all excited with, okay, we have too much regulation, or I love having Amazon offering me financial services. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I want Amazon to become an unregulated foreign players managing a large market share in Canada. Personally, I don't think that's.
No, because we've all seen the social dilemma now, but we've also seen the big short. And if we're not ready, see, I had a really clear lesson early in my career in 2008. If you haven't experienced it, what happens when the system goes unchecked? It's very scary. We rely on these things like we rely on toilet paper, this kind of certainty, but it takes a huge ecosystem to maintain that type of certainty. So what we're trying to do, at least what I'm trying to do, is add a layer of scalability and innovation to what should be incredibly secure, so that we have something to live our lives on. We live in a leveraged way. That's just the truth. But we must do that responsibly. We keep evaluating people on collateral, which is, like we take a look and we say, I'm going to evaluate you on your collateral. No, no, you need to evaluate businesses on their merit, and
Yeah.
that will create certainty.
Yeah, and it's, I think to your point, it's also the old school way where a lot of these businesses were industrial manufacture. So you were, assessing hard assets. Now it's getting more and more difficult to do that. So people need to change. So
Mhm.
last question, lighter question. So what was your own transformation during COVID? And what did you learn? What were the experiences, hopefully positive?
When I say the word inspiring, it's not because this is not a devastating time and there are many people who have lost a lot. It's because I don't believe there's anything more important than meaning in life. And I can't create PPE and I can't be on the front lines. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. I volunteered on an ambulance, but I would have been a terrible doctor. I'm squeezy, but I can contribute here. And the ability to do that has meant everything. 18-hour days, watching my children do mimicking behavior where they grab fake laptops and they say, I'm Keren from Boss Insights. My youngest is 3. I I just feel like you know what? The first thing we did in March, before anyone knew there was government funding, was we said to any lender who's willing to provide capital to a new business client, which is a tall order, we will provide our technology for free. We will provide, you
Amazing.
know, and I stand by that. When we put up our PPP platform and it calculated forgiveness for borrowers, which it's very challenging to get borrowers to give financial statements, let alone fill out an 11-page form, we found partners who really wanted that. This has been inspiring because we can do something. We are here, and what I've seen is an immense amount of collaboration. So that's what I've experienced professionally. I feel somehow it's 2 years later in terms of the learning we've all had. Um, Shopify CEO Toby said 2030 digitization will be here in 2020.
Mhm.
And I don't think we've seen the last of this. Digitization is now part of business continuity. Last year, it wasn't even a top 3 priority.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. That was very interesting, and hearing your perspective, which is also always different from the previous person. So thank you very much, and good luck with everything, and long live both inside.
can I just say thank you, because you are doing also a heck of a lot for the Canadian ecosystem, and we're really lucky to have you be part of it. And I cannot wait to see what 2021 brings for you.
Thank you very much. You'll be the first to know. Thank you. Take care and take care.
Okay. Ciao.